Hi, in this presentation I'm going to talk a little bit about what religions are and what we do in religious studies to give you a little bit of an overview of both of those things. So let's just jump right into it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about religions just in a very general way so you can kind of have a sense of what they share in common, okay? So all religions, although Hinduism might argue against this, but all religions have a beginning, okay? Something happens, okay? So someone or a group of people have an extraordinary experience, right? An experience that shifts who they are, how they think about the world, how they think about the divine, how they think about ultimate things. It's groundbreaking for them. It kind of rocks them to their core. Right? And of course, if you have an experience like that, the first thing we do, right, when we have big experiences is that we tell people. Okay? So religions have origins that start with these extraordinary experiences, and they have stories about these experiences, right? And the stories of what this experience means. Okay? So, if it's extraordinary, oftentimes that the group of people grows, or if someone has an experience, that oftentimes people gather around them and they become a community, right? And they take their stories, they reflect on this original experience, but they're also moving through time, right? So the original community or the original person who had the experience will pass away. They'll live in different contexts. If the religion expands around the world, people will live in different cultures. And so what happens is that you have important moments of wrestling with what does this religion that comes out of this extraordinary experience mean in my context, in my time, right? Who are going to be the leaders or the people who live this experience extraordinarily, right? So people will arise, they'll become leaders, they'll become really good models of this religious experience. So the community that was formed out of the beliefs and the stories of this original experience, who may be growing, right? They're moving through history. That as a community, right, they're always revisiting, deciding what they believe as a community, right? Some of these important people, these great teachers, will help the community think about what they believe about God or ultimate things, what they believe about people, about themselves, about the community, about people outside of the community, what they believe about their relationship to nature or animals or the universe, right? That they have to think about what this extraordinary experience means for how they think about things, right? And they also will reflect and on their beliefs through their rituals. Rituals help the community kind of relive their original stories, reflect on their original stories, reflect on who they are, help people come into the community, help people grow in their lives in the community. So rituals are a big part of what religions do for their members. And then there's always a morality or a way of living that should be reflective of the beliefs and the stories and the history of the community. Right? So what do we mean by morality, right? It's how their beliefs and their values that come from those beliefs should inform their action, right? So there's often teachings about this, things that the community believe are good ways of living and not so good ways of living. And also that the community, as it moves through history, has to think about new questions or new issues as they arise. And so the community will reflect, well, if we believe this and we have these values, how should we respond to this new issue in the world? So you can see here is like an overview of a religious experience, a development of the religion that is kind of shared generally among all religions. Now, religious studies comes in, and it studies each part of these things. So there are people who do religious studies who really focus on the origins and the central stories of the religion. So we think about people who study the Bible or study the Quran, people who study the life of the original Buddha, right? So that's part of what we study. What was that experience and what does it mean? So, for instance, if someone was going to be studying Sikhism, they might study about the original Guru Nanak, who had this extraordinary experience that led to the religion of Sikhism. In Catholicism, right, people might study the Bible, the Gospels, to learn about the experience people had with Jesus and why that was extraordinary for them. In Islam, religious studies, of course, would study the Prophet Muhammad and his revelations, and the Quran, right? And so that's part of the focus of religious studies on the origins. And then if we were going to study the history and how these religions develop over time, we're going to take these three examples again. In Sikhism, they were led by 10 different gurus, which is like a leader, a teacher, a spiritual teacher. So we would think about what was happening under each one of these gurus. How did they expand the religion? How did they bring people together around the religion? If we were to think about the history of Catholicism, early Catholicism, medieval Catholicism, Catholicism after the split of the Protestant Reformation, each of these time periods of Catholicism would look a little different, and we would study them. In Islam, if we were going to study the history of Islam, we would think about leaders who came after the Prophet Muhammad, about the spread of Islam, about the different sects in Islam. And so that's how we would study the history of it in religious studies. In terms of beliefs, if we were focusing on studying the beliefs of different religions, in Sikhism, right, we would really focus on they believe that God is one, that everyone is actually worshiping and coming into relationship with the same God. Equality is an important belief and value for them. In Catholicism, we would study about the Trinity because Catholics believe that Jesus is God. We would think about what it means for Catholicism to be a universal church, to think of it as a universal community. We might study their liturgy in terms of the Mass or other liturgical events. In Islam, we want to dive into the 5 pillars of Islam, right? That kind of also connect to morality as well, but about what are the beliefs that someone needs to have in order to be a Muslim, and how are they expected to live? Which leads us into the study of morality in religious studies. So for Sikhism, we can see values of hospitality and service impact how they are in the world. Catholicism has a long tradition of a social teaching that invites Catholics to have a preferential option for the poor, to think about the dignity of every person and what that means for the living of life and what it means for contemporary issues. And in Islam, right, charity is very important. Modesty is very important, right? So this impacts how people live their religions. So you can see how we think about the experience of religion and then how we would study each aspect of the religion itself. And what we're trying to do when we study in a very basic way is to increase our religious literacy when we study different religions. And what is that? That is about having accurate information and knowledge about religions. And why religious literacy? Why is it important? Because in a world where people have a lot of prejudice towards each other and prejudice against religions. Accurate information has been shown that we have accurate information about religions. It reduces intolerance and it promotes acceptance. So just very fundamentally, learning some basic things about religions is very helpful for us and improves our effective citizenship.